2020 training camp comes to a close, and possibly the strangest training camp of all time for your New Orleans Saints. Hi, everybody. Welcome into the New Orleans Saints training camp show here on CST. I'm Caroline Gonzalez alongside senior reporter John DeShazier. JD, you've been around for a few training camps now. How would you compare this year's training camp to years in past?
Well, let's just say this is like a wedding. Let's hope this is the last time we ever have to do this one. We do not want to have to do this again. Extremely odd, obviously, especially when you're accustomed to seeing NFL teams, have training camp and have off season and that kind of thing. But with the social distancing and the lack of media and all those things, the spacing, all those things conspired to really make it an odd camp. Again, safety precautions. So obviously those are things that had to be done, but still very, very, very strange.
Well, in all of his years in coaching, Sean Payton probably hasn't been through a training camp like this one. In fact, at the beginning of training camp, he said he wasn't even comfortable calling this a training camp. But yesterday, head coach Sean Payton spoke on how he would assess this year's training camp.
I felt like we've gotten a lot accomplished. I felt like the last week and a half has been really good. Injury-wise, I think, knock on wood, I think we've handled that pretty well, and we've avoided some of the soft tissue injuries that can come up in training camp. But it's not that far away here before we'll really get an assessment of where our team's at, and then we go from there. But overall, I've been pleased. There's still a number of things that we're going to have to work on next week in our game prep, and then get ready to go.
Well, every NFL team has to make cuts by September 5th at 3 p.m. Central Time. That is the deadline for cuts for the 53-man roster and 16-man practice squad. JD, would you say that this has been the most challenging year to ever make cuts for teams?
In a word, yes. It will be the most difficult because you hadn't had the normal amount of exposure for players. No preseason games, no off-season program, no mini camps. So the reps, the live reps, the game reps have been non-existent. And so what coaches and staffs have had to learn about players, they've had to try to do so under conditions in training camp. Now, it's difficult to replicate a game situation. It just is, and especially if you're not having contact. And yet that's exactly what NFL coaches and staffs have been tasked with doing this year.
Well, hear from the Saints coaches on how they plan on making assessments for this year's cuts.
To some degree, less exposure in game situations. We've tried to create those situations in practice. I think the one thing I just finished talking with the team about is, the cuts take you to 53. That hadn't changed, but the practice squad has. And so the flexibility that each club has throughout the league, with 16 now on the practice squad, I do think the additional practice squad allotment is going to be a plus heading into this season. And you focus on a 53 and a 16, but really, 69 is as your team. And I think, again, this year, to answer your question specifically, there'll be a few positions that'll be a little bit maybe more challenging than what might have been our decisions a year ago.
All right, don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll hear from Saints safety DJ Swearinger. You're watching the Saints Training Camp Show here on CST. Welcome back into the New Orleans Saints Training Camp Show here on CST. I'm Caroline Gonzalez alongside senior reporter John DeShazier. JD, safety for the Saints, DJ Swearinger, came into the team last year in December, spent some time with the teams, but he's spent time with numerous teams in the NFL since 2013. But the Saints had to like what they saw last year out of DJ.
Well, he only played the last regular season game and the playoff game. But as you mentioned, yeah, they liked him. They brought him back for another year. He's a veteran presence. He's a physical player. And the most important thing, he can still play. He was flying around the ball here in training camp. He got his hands on balls. He still shows off that physicality. He's a guy that you want in that secondary because he's got the attitude that you want for a defensive player. Aggressive. He's always pressing up against offensive players. He's always creating some action. So he's a perfect fit, I think, for the Saints secondary.
Well, DJ gave his own scout on this year's training camp.
I feel like I've done a great job, especially it being my first training camp here, just learning the way of how the Saints practice, the way that Coach D.A. wants everything ran, the way my DB coach, Aaron wants everything ran, and it's been a great competitive camp. I feel like I've made some plays, definitely been around the ball. I try to touch the ball every chance I get, so just to get that habit and get the conditioning. So I think I'll give myself a good camp, but now it's time to get into real football and real game planning, man, and that's where I think my strong point is, game planning, seeing it on film, making the corrections, communicating, and, breaking the team down and getting the job done.
Well, we've heard from the Saints defense all training camp about how they've really stood out this year, especially in the secondary. JD, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, the defense as a whole has shown some cohesion. But, of course, when you get into the subgroups, the defensive linemen, the linebackers, the defensive backs, then you see definitely a little bit more cohesion because those guys are in the same room together. They're studying the same film together. Those guys are lining up together. So there's obviously a little brotherhood within the brotherhood when you're talking about certain groups.
Well, following practice yesterday, DJ said there is extreme chemistry in the Saints secondary.
It's definitely improved. We got different people in different spots now. So the communication has definitely elevated. We got a lot of experience. We got a 12-year vet. And Malcolm, you got P-Rob, 11 years. You got Jack Rabbit with 9, and I got 8 in myself. So with us four, along with the experience that, the guys that's been here for 4 and 5 years, it brings a lot of talent. It brings a lot of chemistry and experience that you can't really coach. So that's always a plus, man. And the chemistry, it always helps the talent win.
All right, when we come back, we'll close things up here on the New Orleans Saints Training Camp Show here on CST. Welcome back into the New Orleans Saints Training Camp Show on CST. I'm Caroline Gonzalez alongside my partner in crime and John DeShazier. JD, we heard a lot from linebacker Kaden Elliss in last year's training camp. The Saints were really excited to have him, but unfortunately he tore his ACL early in last year's preseason. But what are your thoughts on him in this year's training camp?
Well, you like to see the bounce back because sometimes, injuries can be devastating, especially for a young player and a player who I think is as highly regarded as Kaden Elliss is. He got a lot of snaps last year in training camp with the starters at linebacker. I thought he was getting very, very accustomed to playing with those guys and hopefully developing chemistry with that lineup. And then he gets to the regular season, tears his ACL, he's out. And then, rehabilitation and surgery and those things are extremely lonely processes when you're going through it pretty much by yourself with the training staff. So he's shown that he's an upbeat guy. We already know that about him, but he came through, it seems, with flying colors.
Well, all that time in rehab and all the loneliness paid off because Kaden said he reflected a lot during that time and learned about himself.
Last year was tough, not being able to get the physical reps, but it was a great opportunity to sit back and watch and learn mentally, to really hone in on the defense as a whole, to really hone in on different techniques and how guys, I get to watch an all-pro, one of the best in the league, if not the best in the league, do it each and every day. In DeMario, and then you've got so many other great guys that are out there playing last year that I got to just sit and watch and learn from, watch their process, watch how they do each and everything. So getting to see that, getting to grow mentally last year, although again it sucked and it was tough that I didn't get to have the physical reps. It was a great opportunity to learn.
All right, JD, for the last time in training camp of 2020, do you have the news and notes for us?
Well, I think the biggest thing is Drew Brees finished out the last 3 training camp practices without throwing. That gave extra reps to the backups, Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston. Now, that probably pretty much settled who the backup quarterback is going to be, and I imagine somewhat that probably was the reason that Drew Brees didn't throw in those last 3 practices. He already knows the offense. Obviously, that gave those 2 backup guys an opportunity to get an extended look, get a lot of throws and practice. So, a lot of determination probably was made from those reps in practice. Also, rookie offensive lineman Cesar Ruiz, who had the first 5 practices at right guard, and then he had the next 4 practices at center, did not finish out training camp beyond that. He got injured, unfortunately. Wasn't able to establish the chemistry, I would imagine, that he would like to have established with Drew Brees as Drew Brees is center. Now, he'll have an opportunity still to get back in and reestablish that, you hope, but if nothing else, we do know that he can play right guard. And also, rookie linebacker Zach Bond, the last preseason practice, was back on the field. We know the practice prior to that, he was running sprints on the sideline, doing some conditioning. This time, at least he was out there and walked through with those players. So hopefully he'll be ready for the regular season opener.
All right, well, a lot to keep our eye on ahead of the season opener on September 13th, right here inside the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. Reminder, Saints make their roster cuts today. The final roster cuts will happen by 3 p.m. Central. We'll have all of your coverage on NewOrleansSaints.com, or of course, you can download the Saints app and turn on your notifications. For John DeShazier, Caroline Gonzalez, thanks so much for joining us on the 2020 Training Camp Show here on CST.